take it where we want to go.
And we take it where it needs to go. The incredible coverage that our affiliates have been providing to this network. We have 13 radio stations in the crosshairs of what's expected to be the biggest hurricane in modern time in America. This is extraordinary. So our network is being put to the test as an independent source of local news and information. And I want to congratulate every owner, every operator, every reporter, anchor, and host, producer, newsroom, intern, because they're all working around the clock for the safety of the public. That's what broadcasting was originally intended to do, and Starcom Network, and in addition with our good colleagues, we have such great partners. The Weather Channel and our network go back a long time. They are working around the clock, and in conjunction, we're giving you what I think is the best possible coverage of an urgent news story. Stand by. Our next guest will explain to us what happens when this kind of water gets in your home.
Over 30 and your life be still. An exposition in the art of will. Hey, Mr. Tyll. Mr. Tyll. They may see you as unmerciful. I think you still believe in miracles. Hey, Mr. Tyll.
Dr. John Townbridge joins us. Water leads to deadly mold. Dr. Townbridge, thank you for being on the show today.
Ed, thanks for the invitation. This is such critical information at a time that people absolutely need to know.
You know, it is a little bit unbelievable that we've gone so long without a breach of the coastline, without a storm surge. And if you look at what happened in Houston as a precursor to what might begin this weekend, any hour now, it really boggles the mind. So I want to get the listeners from all across the country, most especially our listeners in Florida. We have 13 radio stations there on the Starcom network. We're to begin thinking here about a massive amount of water and deadly mold.
Well, Ed, I'm in Houston, and very fortunately, my home and office, my family, everybody is fine. But so many people have suffered devastating flooding. We are about to see another episode of that, not just in Florida, but as that storm tracks northward, other people could suffer significant flooding. And 1/4 inch in your house, that is significant flooding if you're worried about the health risks later on.
Well, let's go slow with what people are familiar with already. We already know how horrible mold is and can be. What kinds of triggers, thresholds should people be paying careful attention to, which would create the environment for the mold to come, spread quickly, pose a threat?
At any level of water in your house is a major breach because although your foundation is secure, the walls will literally suck up the water inside. And the most you'll probably see is either a bit of staining on the outside or a smell, that moldy smell when you go somewhere and it's been, especially out in a garage or a storage building that's kind of been invaded and locked up for a while. It just has that odd smell. Well, that's danger right there because you're in the environment where you are very likely to become a host to the fungus itself. And that is the real health risk because I can guarantee you, you won't recognize it and your doctors won't recognize it.
All right. You have written extensively on the subject, but we use you as a resource today for what we're seeing on the screen and just did in Houston. So let's go with step A, a safe assessment. What should people know that it wouldn't occur to them? Not to elongate the question, but please include these listeners. Florida, and I'm sure Houston to some degree, but Florida is notorious for people constantly relocating there. So there are veterans who have been through dozens of hurricanes, and there are always families on the block. This is going to be their baptism. This is the first one for them. So I just wanted to put them in your mind when you're talking about a safe assessment here. Go right ahead.
Ed, that is so true. And Houston, in the 40 years I've been here in medicine, has added 2 million people. So we are definitely looking at folks who come from environments up north, back in the plains or whatever, who've not really seen something like this unless they've been right next to a major river like the Mississippi. What happens is, number one, you've got to be careful going back into your home if you've left it, because it will potentially be very dangerous. Here in Houston, we just grabbed a 9-foot alligator out of one of the houses. He thought that was a pretty good place to ride out this storm. The key is any amount of water in your home is an emergency, because mold, mildew, fungus, yeast, they're all in the same kingdom there. They help each other grow, and they grow very quickly. So I'm talking about within a matter of hours. So in 24, 36, 48 hours, you can start a really sick mold growth inside your house. You have got to get wet carpets out, not dried, out, because they are serious. They've got to be discarded. You've got to look seriously. If you've got an intrusion up your walls, you'll see a water stain or stain on the legs of the furniture. You have got to get those out. You have got to be able, like, for instance, you've got to cut into the walls. This is a major remediation effort. You have got to get the inside of those walls dry. And some people just try to do just a few inches. You generally have to do 3 or 4 feet off the level of the ground, because this stuff will invade up the walls, up the insulation, up the siding. Any of these things are potentially going to harbor mold for the years to come. And don't forget, you've also got the risk of snakes, you've got the risk of spiders, you've got the risk of scorpions and fire ants here in Texas. They float along in beds. All of these things have been looking just to get away from the storm too. So when you clean out your house, you've got to be careful. And if you have, significant mud or other things, you have got to very carefully protect your skin, because the infections that you can get from this soiled water, from the invasion in your house, can literally be deadly. I mean, you can lose limb and life.
Oh, my. You're killing me here, but we need to hear this bluntly the way you stated. All right,
Right.
Look, let's back up a little bit again for some listeners that are maybe a bit older or newbies. This is a brand new experience, okay? And again, I got
Right.
13 affiliates down there, so we're immersed, no pun intended, in this, in this threat of the flood. All right, here we go. First things first. If you are going to evacuate or not evacuate, would you give us what you like as the good criteria for I'm out of here, or I am preparing to defend this home against exactly what Doctor was telling Ed on the air? I'm not going to let that standing water sit overnight even. I'm getting that stuff. I'm going to be proactive. I'm going in. What kind of criteria for that decision do you like?
It's fairly simple. I favor evacuation, because then you're pretty safe. And, if you go into an area where the storm actually chases you, you still are facing down less a violent of a storm, and you also still have mobility. You have got to remember to take changes of clothing. You've got to remember to take your medications. The other thing to grab is memorabilia. You can replace anything except those treasured pictures, those movies, and so on. Grab those things, load them in the trunk of the car, and get out. If you don't take your medications, I can assure you it can become very difficult, as many people have encountered here in Houston, just getting to stay current on that. I'll give you an example. I left Houston actually for a scheduled trip to Virginia Thursday just before the storm arrived. I could not get back for 11 days. I mean, it wasn't feasible. I couldn't get to my house if I got finally to the airport. So this is serious stuff. This is not joking around. If you decide to stay and defend your home, I have good news and I have bad news. Number one, it will be the experience of a lifetime. That's the good news. The bad news is there is nothing you can do to defend that home. Rising water is like a tsunami. You cannot stop it. And people talk about sandbags and flood walls and everything. It's really a matter of altitude, how high you are up with regard to the flooding waters. And secondly, it's a matter of the flood drainage. Here in Houston, we get water from the storm, but then we have a huge catchment area where that water is going to continue flowing at us for the next 2 to 3 weeks minimum.
All right, look, you're begging this question we've had with other guests. It's very, I even bite my tongue in asking it today, but you've got me in it because of all what you're sharing here, this data you're giving us.
Right.
Should we be living in these areas when, I'll say it this way to be kind, once we've been reminded by a mega event, should we continue to persevere? Well, that was a 100-year storm, so I guess we're good for another 80 plus. It might be the wrong way. I mean, I don't have to tell you, again, it's a long question, but keep all of our listeners in mind here, right? You got that school. Yeah. Then you're going to have these holdouts that are nature people. They're like, all right, if that's the way I go in a tsunami in my backyard. I'm not going running from it. I put my life here. The kids were born in the living room. This whole rustic thing. This is the way we go. So now we're starting to get very large in our event, and the whole community is tied into your decision. If you decide to stay, then somehow the community's got to factor you into recovery. If you make recovery more difficult for them, or you counter to the community you're in, you see the questions come up here.
Exactly. And, I have to tell you, we did thousands of water rescues and air rescues in the Houston area because the water came so fast, nobody really even thought to get out. It literally rose overnight in some areas, and that challenges your well-being very quickly. This is an existential event. Your very existence could be on the line. Should we live in areas like that? Well, I'll tell you, I haven't moved. I still live in Houston. I have a little weekend place outside that's 90 miles north of the coastline, and I've had 2 hurricane eyes go over my place. They don't go that far inward. What the hell is all this?
Right.
I haven't moved from there either. We make decisions and such. The real problem is when you live in an area where you're going to require a water rescue or an air rescue, and the facilities cannot be made available to you. You either can't call out, and like people stuck in New Orleans and Houston trying to wave folks down from their rooftops, the communication system goes down. Perhaps it's too dangerous to run the lifeboats or the helicopters. Perhaps it's hey, you're just lower on the list because somebody else looks in more dire straits. These are serious events. Now, Houston probably had higher water than Florida is going to get, but like I said, the future health risks of low water in your home can get you just as seriously. So these are, you present wonderful, deep questions. Deep water questions. There's no easy answers.
None. I think there are none, right? Well, that's the key. The key is, since there are no easy answers, somehow we have to have the public carve out workable answers. And I appreciate you being with us today to do that. All right, so what is a mold remediation specialist? That's a credentialed person, it sounds like. And there's going to be a handful for the thousands of wet homes. Walk us through what we should know about that.
Let me tell you the serious limitation. About around the turn of the century, I was medical director for a mold remediation company. And the problem is that many people, including some folks who call themselves specialists, do not recognize the depth of the cleaning that has to be done. These are folks who come in. They can bring in culture plates and air sniffers and all sorts of things. The real key is ultimately they've got to carve out all of the infected materials in your house. I say infected, not affected, because these things are going to harbor the growth of organisms that ultimately can kill your body. Now, you will die slowly because you will suffer with a whole variety of illnesses, and you go to the organ specialist doctors for the whichever organ is involved.
No, I know what you mean. You're scaring me. Look, here's I mean that in a half joking way. What
Yes.
is the time you have from when the water rolls to when this stuff is starting to be breathable and dangerous? Do you have any
Oh,
window at all, or you got nothing? The water's here. Run.
yeah.
Turn your back on it.
Please, yeah, please don't ask me questions like this, because literally in 48 hours you are in trouble inside your structure.
Right.
And your structure can include your car.
Right.
Your structure includes your office, your retail sales stores, and whatever. We are talking the environment in which you live. Now, yeast, fungus, mold, all of that is always around us. We're generally in a good balance with it. In other words, we're always fighting off stuff with our immune system. That's how we get through life. This is a challenge way beyond what your immune system normally sees, and especially if you go from place to place and you do your car to do it, and all of them are infected, you're a target. Now, something like a car, don't try and do that yourself. The panels, the seats, everything can harbor this stuff literally for the years you own it, or after you sell it. Poor buyer. You have got to depend on specialty car repair shops to take care of that. The homes, mold remediation, I've got to tell you, it literally needs to start the same way we've done it in Houston. You haul out the furniture, you haul out the carpet, you haul out anything that isn't tacked down but got wet. That's got to be literally ditched or remediated. And the problem is remediating it is very hard, especially with furniture and such.
All right, so let me get a picture of this, right? Again,
Sure.
God forbid our listeners are seeing their own home like this, but one thing for sure, we're going to see lots of video in the news of what comes. So I want to paint a picture, even though it's unpleasant, so we get the sense of what you mean here and what you just said. So you got a place that's soaked up, and you're in one of these ruined neighborhood blocks. Houses side by side look the same. Roofs are out. Insides are exposed. Is what you just said to mean that we got to take it down to the concrete, maybe even the wood struts, or do we just flatten this thing? I don't know. We spending time sorting out how much of what I can save. Do you just bulldoze it quickly for the cost and do the rebuild, maybe of a more modest home, but instead of, reworking what's there, just tell me to strip it away of all mold. If you got it to the concrete, to this, concrete block, and the concrete slab, would you be safe to go back up with wood and drywall from there, or you still couldn't certify it because concrete and the slab and maybe even the dirt below it could keep something that's going to come back and compromise your rebuild?
You raised the very critical questions. First thing you do when you get back in your house is see if you can rescue any of your memorabilia, important things. Get them out, get them safe. Second thing, go back in the house and look at it. Just thank God that you're still alive. That's really the important thing. Now you deal with the stresses of life. You start literally pulling stuff out because your home might be salvageable. I mean, if you had 3 feet of water in your house and you get all the furnishings out and you start cutting off the wallboard, you've got bleach as your best friend. You've got to soak the inside of that house before you ever put any rebuild on it. Let it really thoroughly dry and be sure it's in good shape. One of the things we used to do is add a little dye to the bleach water, and that way we could tell where we had definitely sprayed so we didn't miss anything, okay? Simple little trick there. In terms of, do you gut the house and do you ditch the house, whatever, 85% of the people here in Houston who've gotten flooded did not have flood insurance. That's a disaster. They're going to end up walking the home because they still have the mortgage and they don't have a home. That's going to decimate neighborhoods, and that's possible in Florida depending on their insurance status. I think you can salvage a foundation. You might not want to, but I think you can. Destructing a house has to be done quickly because otherwise you're going to start being toxic to the environment. As soon as you start dozing down a house that's loaded with mold and yeast and fungus and such, you're going to spread that through the air to everybody. This gets much more complicated, much more complicated.
Wow. You're good.
You're raising
you're good
all
at
this
this.
sad,
No, I mean,
but
you're
important
good.
questions.
You're good. You've been there. Now, your bestseller is called The Yeast Syndrome, right? So yeast and mold are what, cousins, versions of one, a subset of the other? All I can tell you is the mold I've always seen is the green mold on the bread. Oh, got to throw it away. So that's a certain experiment we did as kids. Yeast, I know, raises the bread, but I also know there's something called Candida albicans, which
Correct.
are yeast in the body. So go ahead. What is this yeast syndrome you wrote about there, and how is it connected to the yeast that we're familiar with?
It's very simple. Animals, well, plants take sunlight, they make energy, and then animals eat the plants to get the energy, or they eat other animals that ate the plants. Fungus is the third kingdom. It eats the other two, the plants and the animals. And the danger is that the fungus metabolism requires that it has to live off the other two. So it has to live. It's a survival mechanism. Fungus, yeast, mold, mildew, they're all basically the same. It's just we're seeing them in different formats, okay, to exploit different parts of the environment. The fungus inside us is always inside us. I mean, this has been something there for millennia, okay? But when it grows out of balance is when you get in trouble. Now, we normally think of, antibiotics and birth control pills and cortisone and, of course, our deplorable diet. We know about that. But, the stresses in life, all these things add together to compromise our defense system, and that allows the yeast to grow out of balance and create the many symptoms that I've talked
Now,
with you
the
about
kind of stuff
before.
that does that, right? And I do, again, it's remarkable. I listened to a dialogue about exactly this. I had to be 82, 83, and it was an osteopath who used to come on the show quarterly and really talk about this. But I mean, it would go over people's heads. It was very hard for them to follow. I think it's much better now. We've been better educated down the line. So we
Right.
get this balance thing for sure. That's one thing I think the body, whether you're looking at chiropractic, muscles, all that kind of stuff, alignment, balance, have a great deal to do with health for sure.
It's survival. That's it.
Indeed, right? The
Absolutely.
mechanism, absolutely. The organism itself, the body wants to achieve this optimal health. What
Right.
what has beaten us up in the yeast department? What's been a real aggravator? Lifestyle wise, is it the Coca-Cola that is, not to pick on them, but it's my favorite soda? The 7-Up, the stuff I love. Is it everything I love that I should be doing less of, and that's doing a lot of McDonald's and salt and sugars and flours and glutens that has whacked us into being unhealthy?
Well, Ed, it's really the sugars and the starches. That's the key stuff. Did I mention the sodas and the alcohol and things like that? But those are all sugars and starches, and that's the key. If you can just eliminate those from your diet as much as possible, you dramatically stop feeding the yeast as much. Now, people get cravings, and they go, but I got to have it.
Right.
That's the yeast
That's
talking
me.
to you. It's
That's
saying,
me.
You're starving me.
That's me. I'm in the dark. The dark. I won't even turn on the light because I don't want to admit to myself what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean? I'm so ashamed and hungry at the same time. I don't know what I'm doing. Yes, so that craving is chemical. It's like
That's
anything else.
It's the yeast. It's the yeast talking to you saying,
Yeah,
feed me.
It's yelling. It's yelling at me, bashing me over the forehead. It's killing
Right.
me. Yeah. No, God bless you for coming on explaining that.
But, Ed,
Yeah.
Ed, the problem is that when we start getting the mold exposure in the houses,
Right.
that's going to encourage the growth of the yeast inside us. It's going to sponsor it in major ways. We're going to get sick,
Yeah.
and that's dangerous.
Listen, we have a minute left, and you have a new book on the yeast syndrome, which is entitled Sick and Tired. I thought that would be the title of my autobiography, but nonetheless, you've grabbed it. You've grabbed it. I want you to succeed. It's a great title. By the way, it comes out October 14, and you're going to actually publish, I believe, on the day that you're at a public education seminar. So that's
Right.
pretty awesome. But just specifically, this second book is about what aspect of the yeast syndrome?
Oh, let me scare you even more, okay? But it's actually kind of hopeful news. We're finding, because we've gotten a lab test available in the last 2 years, we can prove that you have a deep blood fungus growing inside you, inside your tissues, and that's causing unexplained illnesses like cancers and rheumatoid arthritis and lupus, severe kidney syndromes, severe diabetes, skin conditions that haven't been treated elsewhere. We're seeing these things that can respond to treatment as though they are a fungus, because they are.
See, now, here's the thing. Keith Richards and Eric Clapton, they would go down to Mexico and get their blood washed because they had little bad rock and roll behavior. Do we have
Bad juju.
Right? Are we going to get a fungicide that we can squirt in there, will circulate, and zap, it's out, or we're not even close to that level?
We're not close to that, but I have to tell you, a lot of anti-cancer drugs kill fungus, and a lot of anti-fungus drugs kill cancer. We've got the treatment for most of these patients. I'm talking MS, ALS, cancers. Every cancer patient I've tested and treated, they have it and they respond. It's incredible. It's the most exciting part of medical practice I have ever seen in my 39 years.
Well, you know something? I want to say one more thing about you being on the show and answering and helping people understand. You do have that doctor thing that when I was a kid, they were all supposed to have it. Like you get one doctor like you. He's got a nice, deep, resonant voice. He's very knowledgeable. He's reassuring. He's, firm, hits you with what's really going on. This is what doctors used to be. Now the communication level has changed. And I will tell you, boy, it's good that you're on an outlet like ours because it's hard to find what you bring doctor by doctor. Years ago, the doctor really was an advisor in your life. He was someone who remembered who you were, just your general state of health was somewhere up there, and we miss that kind of doctoring. You do a great job at everything that you're into now is so good for us. Years ago, we didn't have this knowledge. Now the knowledge curve, it's really skyrocketed. You're a great ambassador for it. All right, well, thank you for today. Here's how people can reach out to you. Our guest, Dr. John Townbridge, can be reached at www.healthchoicesnow.com, or you can call 1-800-FIX-PAIN, just the way it sounds, 1-800-FIX PAIN, toll-free phone number. Again, the website, www.healthchoicesnow.com. The new book on the yeast syndrome is entitled Sick and Tired. It comes out October 14th. But the Bantam bestseller you ought to grab right now. It's called The Yeast Syndrome. And get familiar with what 1 in 3 Americans is suffering from, and that are symptoms and illness associated with yeast organism poisoning. Well, this is the big thing now, Dr. Townbridge, even the advertisers are getting to it. The gut, what's in the gut, what's living in there, what's the biochemistry of what's inside you. Even if you're not symptomatic at the moment, we're now getting people to be aware of this. So, they're making progress for sure.
I love it.
All right. Well, thank you for being with us today on a Friday. We got a big weekend, of course. I know in everybody's thoughts and prayers are the people of Florida, and as you pointed out, thank you, Florida and beyond, Georgia, the Carolinas, the mid-Atlantic states. These storms loom large, so thank you for being a great resource today in advance of that event.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate being with you.
Dr. John Townbridge. The Ed Tyll Show, Starcom Radio Network. Hurricane Irma, possibly the biggest hurricane on record in modern times, about to land on Florida.
Riders on the storm. Riders on the storm. Into this house we're born. Into this world we're thrown, like a dog without a bone, an actor out alone. Riders on the storm. There's a killer on the road. you give this man a ride, sweet family will die. Killer on the road, yeah.
Breaking news, the best music, the smartest, funniest talk. Starcom Radio Network.
Girl, you gotta love your man. Girl, you gotta love your man. Take him by the hand. Make him understand. The world on you depends. Our life will never end. Gotta love your man. Yeah.
Tyll Show, Starcom Radio Network. You're caught up now on your Irma update. Category 5, potential at any moment. Category 4 right now. All of your local news, weather, traffic. Also got the market in jitters about the storm. Could cost big cash out of the public treasury. Business lost. All kinds of catastrophes now are being mathematically calculated. So I want to congratulate our 13 Florida radio station affiliates of the Starcom Radio Network, gathering news on site, neighborhood by neighborhood, family by family, pitching in together, helping one another, giving each other shelter and emotional community support. These are terrific people. Our next guest is David Essel, and David joins us today about another catastrophe, and it doesn't go unreported. It's out there. People know this is going on. It is one of those social problems people are uncomfortable talking about. I don't know that the solutions are obvious or that they ever have been in this area, but that's another demotivator for people. I'm not sure if we really know what to do about it. But David is here to talk about the addiction recovery system in the United States failing miserably. I mean, you don't, go a half a game in the NFL or watching some primetime television show, and you don't hear about rehab. I mean, they're all over you. You know, it's easy. Your insurance company covers it. Bing, bang, boom. You would think that, again, America especially, we're good at so many things. Wow, we must have mastered this. We've been full of drug addiction from, the 50s and 60s and 70s. And, you got all this scope of society involved in addiction, right? We've broadened what is addiction today. We have sex addiction, et cetera. So you'd think, well, boy, I guess the U.S. has this thing amazingly under control. They must be the best of the best, doing great with it. Not the case, David Essel. Welcome to the Ed Tyll Show on Starcom Radio Network.
Ed, thank you so much for having me on. Yes.
Let's walk through what you heard me just give, which is the public's perception and the contrast with the reality that you can share from experience and knowledge.
Oh, and if you look at, people that are involved with anything as the age-old AA, Alcoholics Anonymous program, or the $100,000 a month rehab centers in California, you would swear that we have nailed this thing. And yet, here's the statistics. The 9% of individuals that are struggling with opiate addiction, one of the most devastating addictions our country has ever faced, 170 people a day die in the United States from opiate overdose. 9% who say they're going to get sober will be sober in a year, Ed. 9%. And then we go to the age-old addiction, the oldest one probably known to man, alcohol. And we would say, okay, well, this has been around forever. And we've got programs that have been doing great stuff for years. And the average addiction recovery rate for alcohol is only 10%. Now, this means for all of our mathematicians in your audience, and I laugh, but it's a sad laughter. 91%
I can't
of
believe
opiate
it.
addicts.
Yeah, I can't say I don't want to break in and break your flow, but honest to God, this is you're dealing with a host who's been on the air 42 years and can't get over the fact that so many things like our issue today look almost identical in difficulty as to when I was a child. This is not working. It's not going over well with this back-end baby boomer. I was born in 1956, so I'm technically a boomer, but, I wasn't born right after World War II. Plenty of other people came ahead of me, and I thought, we're fixing poverty. We're fixing a drug addiction. This is not going to stay. Not when we have rockets to the moon. But I will give you my complaint, and you can elaborate if you agree or disagree, please. Society has failed in a number of areas. The one we're talking about is primary. But you say, well, why? That's all I want. I want to know why, how to fix it. I don't really want to wallow in how bad it is. I want to turn the ship around. But here's the telltale sign. People have kept the same appetites for all of these addictions alive with their behavior. No one has changed lifestyles. We still have this emptiness, isolation, whatever experience, and inevitably somebody's going to walk down the street with heroin or gin or something. So, you know what I mean? We got to steer out of this. We got to stop doing what we've always done for some reason. You know what I mean?
Well, Ed, I've been a holistic addiction recovery counselor and coach for 24 years.
There you go.
I was a cocaine addict and alcoholic. I was in denial. I used justification, rationalization. This is how we relax. This is how men bond. This is how we increase our business. This is how we network. I used all of those things. And we came up a number of years ago with the answer to addiction, and that is all addictions are caused. If it's spending, alcohol, nicotine, food, opiates, they're all coming from the same place. It's not genetics. Genetics does not cause any addiction whatsoever. Does genetics have a role with alcoholism? Yeah. But the gene doesn't come out, grab your ass, put you in a bar, and make you drink a bottle of beer.
Right.
So that's one of the big fallacies, Ed. And so what we have is we have all these programs, well-meaning programs, 12 steps, rehab centers, saying it's not your fault.
Let me ask a quick. Let me get you a quick on the record on this one, because this is again close to my heart, close to my listeners. For decades, people who love shows like ours are generally blue-collar laborers, guys that drive, and gals, drive the UPS truck, drive the mail truck, drive the food across town, 18-wheelers, love a show like ours for years and years. So we feel we should always be asking on their behalf. So I want to say this on their behalf. This is what I witnessed as a child, but certainly been reinforced in my career on the air. Blue-collar people know cigarettes are bad, but that's their cheap curbside therapy. And they know alcoholism made their father a washout, and they saw their grandfather, their mother. They're not unfamiliar with it, but it's still cheap relatively for now. Now I'm ready to jump off a roof. Now I can't afford my fourth kid. Now I'm facing eviction, unemployment, intimidation in my neighborhood, crime, crap, garbage, pressure. So this is where it's always broken my heart. Down at that level, nobody goes to any therapist. Your therapist is your wife, your girlfriend, your a buddy at work, if you got it, or nobody. Because we live in a
Or the
world.
bar.
You got it. Exactly. One more shot. Give me the cheapest in the house, the call brands. We all understand this. So this is what I love to bring out in these discussions. What do we got to help the poor, oppressed masses of the repetitive workers in America? I think they're the most vulnerable to alcoholism or opiates or anything because it looks miserable.
Let's look at the cause of all addictions. The cause of all addictions is our inability to deal with the emotions of life. That is the cause. Insecurity, if we don't know how to deal with insecurity, anger, rage, sadness, boredom, I could go through a million. Right now, I'm in Fort Myers, Florida. We are about ready to get hit by that Cat 4, Cat 5 hurricane. And I can tell you that the stress being caused by this is creating an open bar for many people as justification to drink. So they don't have to feel their anxiety. They don't have to feel their fear. They don't have to feel despondent, depression, whatever the words are.
Now, you know what? I gotta ask you. On this point, I got to ask you because we love to challenge orthodoxy. Where do you come down on that? See, there are many people over the years that say, I got the answer for all these alcoholics and drug addicts. Here's the answer, Ed. They have to face it. They have to sit there and, the Frank Sinatra Man with the Golden Arm scene when he's locked in that bedroom, he's throwing himself up against the wall, he's having it needs a fix. Okay, so people have said since I've been on the air and I've been interviewing experts since the 70s on this, they go, this is what they have to do. They have to face it. I don't know they're gonna. Just because you're saying they have to. Where do you come down on this? Do these people have to face their demons, or are they allowed to find a way, like middle-class Americans are, to bob and weave with their demons to keep their sanity? What do you think the answer is there?
Well, Ed, it depends on if you want to heal or if you don't. If you want to heal, you've got to sit in this stuff. You've got to sit in the anxiety. Now, I will say this because I have to make a medical statement here. The only drug that someone can die from in withdrawal is alcohol. So while I'm going to keep going on here, if you drink regularly or you're a binge drinker, every Friday and Saturday you have 6, 7, 8, 10 drinks, I'm going to tell you, don't go cold turkey. Talk to your doctor. They'll give you an anti-anxiety, anticonvulsant medication so you don't freaking die. Okay, so let me just make that statement. But going back to your question, yes. You have to learn how to sit in the boredom without reaching for the sugar or the alcohol or the nicotine or the opiate. You need to sit in your anxiety. If it's about money, a hurricane, your wife or husband divorcing you, yes, Ed, that is the answer. Because if we don't learn how to cope with those, then nothing's changing. We will do what's called cross-addict. So we stop smoking, but we go and start drinking. Or we stop drinking. God, I can tell you in 12-step rooms, there are millions of people that have not drank at all, but they're getting stoned on pot every day, or they're smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. All they've done is cross-addicted. So the answer is, yeah, it's brutal. When I went through it, it was hard as hell. For me to sit and to not reach out for that drink after a long day of counseling people, that's hard.
It is. And I just think, again, not to keep dwelling on them, but they've been so loyal to us on the air, and I think they've been so screwed along the way over the last 30, 40 years. Blue-collar people we don't want them to punch a wall. We don't want them to drive a car off a cliff. We don't want them to carry, or come off the roof. People do have limits, and it seems like if you had a physician and you lived in Westchester County, for example, maybe not the Bronx where I come from, or Brooklyn, Bedford-Stuyvesant, or South Central, where I actually worked for a while in L.A. My studio brought me right there. These are really severe environments. Yes. I don't see a normal person having the wherewithal emotionally to have no assistance. But again, I say if you live in Brentwood, the doctor's going to go crazy trying to find scripts for you How's that feel? Try this one for 4 weeks. You know what I mean? It doesn't sound like addiction in Brentwood. It sounds like a sincere doctor is trying to match a prescription that really balances the serotonin. What is it? Reuptake, the SSRIs, whatever the hell they got going on in there. I know there's something. I know they're doing something. You know, I know they're doing something to these people. And then the poor schmo is on the loading dock. He gets a 5-minute break, and he is going to suck down that cancer stick because that nicotine is going to hit his receptors for a couple of minutes. He's going to go, all right, had a cigarette. Yeah. So I don't know. What's the answer to that?
There is an answer. There is a start. There's a starting point. For every person that doesn't have a penny or is struggling financially right now listening to your show, get into a 12-step program to at least start the process. You can sit there for freaking free. You can go 7 days a week. You can get a sponsor that will help you get on the road. Now, it's better than doing nothing, and it costs nothing. Now, they ask to put $1 into the hat every meeting you go to, but you know what? If you don't have $1, screw it. Sit in there and at least make an attempt to turn your life around. And Ed, I want to say something so crucial to all of your listeners. If you have children, you are setting them up to be screwed if you don't heal yourself.
Yeah.
They will role model you.
Right, exactly.
Just like you probably role modeled your mom and dad.
Yep.
Or your aunt and uncle, or your grandmother and grandfather. You know, if you've got, and I don't care if your kids are 60, you know, you still have a responsibility to be a role model and to get help. And if you don't have money, that's where you can start with 12-step.
The successful use of meditation has caught on. I know you are a fan of this. Meditation, what I see, I mean, tell us what you know about it, because it looks like it's a self-induced placebo effect.
Well, it's a little deeper than a placebo effect. As a matter of fact, the National Institutes of Health around 1992 invested $1 million into South Central LA, speaking of where you're from or where your office was, and they were working with the lowest common denominator of people struggling today, which was overweight Black alcoholics with extremely high blood pressure. And what they found is when they gave them an option, 3 different groups in the study, one group got a medication to lower blood pressure, one group was trained in meditation, and another group was trained in something similar to meditation called mindfulness. The meditation group had the most profound change in lowering their blood pressure. You know, Ed, we have, for people that don't know anything about meditation, if they were to go to YouTube and in the YouTube search box, put my name, David Essel Meditation, we have a free 6-minute meditation there where people can at least get an idea of what it is and how to start it. So you don't have to pay for meditation. And I'm not the only person on YouTube that has a video introducing you to meditation. But it quiets the mind. And in regards to addiction, it allows that mind that's always scurrying around, worrying, anxiety, boredom, anger, resentment, rage, whatever it is, it allows those emotions, Ed, to calm down, which is one step in decreasing the use of addictive substances.
You know, I was able to bring that up while you were speaking. Let me play a brief sample for people. Hold on.
Meditation. You'll find the benefits of meditation. You'll find an interview that I talked about that I did with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the founder of Transcendental Meditation. Today, I want to take you through.
Wow, did you really? The guy, guy from the Beatles?
Yes.
What? Wow.
Hey, Ed, I've been a talk radio host for 27 years, not as long as you.
Got it.
But in 1996, this is a mind-blowing fact I'm going to give you, Ed. In 1996, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi was looking for one radio outlet in the United States to honor the 40th anniversary of Transcendental Meditation, and he chose our show over Larry King, over everyone else out there, Ed. And it was an incredible 1-hour interview with one of the smartest people I've ever been in the presence of in my whole life.
Unbelievable. Wow, that's extraordinary. You know, the thing I think ordinary people who never are in the presence of these folks wonder is because, we'll see them on television for moments at a time, right? Press conference, something or other. But when you're in their presence, it seems like you can feel them nearby. There's something that they put out, like a vibration or a wavelength, a frequency or something that's palpable. Did you have that experience with him?
Oh, you nailed it. Like we call it the aura, right? And the energy of him preceded him. And this is something that is true. I also talked to him on the phone, and when I was on the phone with him, it was no different than being in his presence. You could feel this wave of energy come through the phone. I mean, this is what I'm saying. And this guy, Ed, in a 1-hour interview, and then interacting with him 3 weeks later, he literally changed my life. He literally changed my life. He was that profoundly powerful, that wise. And it was something that I'll never forget. And whenever someone says, what do you believe in meditation? I'll say, oh my gosh, right. Not only do I practice it daily, but I've worked with this man who I think is probably one of the smartest developers of any meditation technique in the history of mankind.
One of the greats, right? World renowned. All right, a couple of things I want to do is I'm watching the clock here. You've worked and inspired and been around and have endorsements from people I highly respect. So I wanted to mention a couple, if you would just reflect on how you interacted with them, maybe what you guys exchanged in terms of experience and knowledge. Dr. Wayne Dyer. This guy was a god when I was a college student at St. John's. He was like the biggest thing that had ever hit our campus. And, of course, the world had come to know and love this man through these PBS specials and his work. Now, I think he's passed, hasn't he, a while?
Yes.
Yeah.
So he passed about a year and a half ago.
That's it. So I knew we lost him a little while back. But this was one of the richest of the people and personalities, I think, that the public was really helped by. He just did so much. How did you come to interact with him or intersect with him?
Well, yeah, you know what? Wayne and I became friends, and it started in 1990. Actually, our latest #1 bestseller, which is called a very bizarre title for a book coming from a positive guy, but the book is called Positive Thinking Will Never Change Your Life, but this book will. I dedicated the book to Wayne Dyer, Ed, and this is what happened. I wrote this in the dedication. In 1991, I believe it was, the very first time I had him on my radio show, at the end of the show, he said, that was really amazing. And I was blown away because he was already a household name back in 91. And I said, Wayne, thank you so much. He goes, I want to come back on. I said, oh, my God, absolutely. He said, okay, now, here's the most important question I can ask you, since you've just interviewed me for an hour. I said, yeah. He goes, how can I be of service to you? Ed, I said,
wow.
He said, how can I help you out? How can I? And I looked and I said, Wayne, oh my God, I was not expecting that from you. I said, my mind is blank right now.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, I'll be back in 6 months. Tell me then. He comes back in 6 months, and I said, would you mind giving me an endorsement of what you think I bring to this world? And he did right on the spot, and that endorsement is on our website at talkdavid.com. People can read it. It was amazing, Ed.
Unbelievable. Well, I tell you what, you must come back. There's much more for us to talk about. Today is kind of it's a weird day because we actually need a lot of what we've talked about here in a different context. When you talk about anxiety and depression and meditation as a solution in this area, there's really looks like there's going to be a lot of heartbreak. Where we have 13 radio stations in Florida. Literally millions of people now are in peril. We're just praying, literally prayers of don't let it be so bad. Let the experts be wrong. Let the storm move, fluctuate. But we all know in real life that doesn't happen. Things do like this occur. So we're going to return to our Irma coverage. But a lot of what you've shared with us today would benefit people who are having enormous anxiety tonight. You got a thought for them for the anxiety of the big weather sword of Damocles that hangs over Florida and our listeners there?
Well, one simple exercise that we give all the time, Ed, is for people to write out the anxiety and the nervousness they're feeling. Just to be real with it, write it out, and then at the end of it, if you are spiritual or religious, ask God to surround you and protect you. And there's that balance. We're dealing with reality. I feel so nervous that we may not find a hotel. I feel nervous that I might lose my home, my condo, my apartment, my mobile home. I'm so anxious that my children who are in Florida and I'm in California might get hurt. And we really get into what we're nervous and anxious about, and then we ask for intervention. And if you're not into spirituality or religion, you can just end it right there and say, cross my fingers. But we do need to put things on paper, Ed, as a way to process. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because there are millions of us right now that are staying, and we are crossing our fingers, praying and hoping as well.
Wow. Thank you for that. You know what I mean? That's exactly what I think we need to do right now, is to just try for a moment to feel what they're feeling, think what they're thinking. It's not really that hard. We don't know the particulars, but we know fear, we know terror, we know the unknown. David, thank you. You do such great work. This is something we'll talk about each time that you're with us. It takes a lot of personal passion for you to do this. This is a lot of energy of yours. Does it come naturally, or do you wake up like a ballistic missile every day, ready to go, or do you have ways of getting yourself into that prime peak state of performance?
And the first hour of every day is spent in calmness. It's in prayer, meditation, journaling. That's my first hour of every day. It's been like that for 34, 35 years. And then after I devote that first hour to those principles, prayer, meditation, journaling, then I am ready to go. My energy is always up. It is partly is because of the fact that I've done what you've done. I've chosen to work in a field that is my calling and is my passion and my love. And when you do that, it's a lot easier to be up than if you're doing something that you absolutely cannot stand. So I've been blessed, I've been challenged, and I would do it the same way again.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, we're so glad to be able to learn from your work and have you on here today to share it with us. Addiction recovery is a tough subject with the numbers that we laid out at the beginning. Thank you for that super hard work. When over 90% are unsuccessful busting out, it really takes a special kind of person to hang with that crowd, working with those odds. So way to go. David Essel on the Ed Tyll Show, Starcom Radio Network. David is the best-selling author of 9, no less than 9 books. He is a counselor. He's a master life coach. He is an inspirational speaker. He's an amazing interview, as you just witnessed. And he's worked with Jenny McCarthy, Wayne Dyer, Kenny Loggins, another one of my favorite human beings, Mark Victor Hansen, and many others. His latest book, clever title as he gave us before, right? Positive thinking will never change your life, but this book will. That's the book from David Essel, The Myth of Positive Thinking and the Reality of Success. Go to davidessel.com, www.davidessel, DAVIDESSEL.com, or go on Amazon to order. All right, news, weather, traffic, sports, Wall Street, the whole thing, plus an in-depth look at all things Hurricane Irma, Category 4, knocking on a 5. Also, direct hit on the state of Florida is what they predict.
Have we become so hideous, rotten to the core, offensively oblivious, ever wanting for more, Mr. Tyll? Take full advantage of an imbecile, cut him off at will. Go ahead and shoot to kill. study and you're laughing still. An exposition in the art of will. Hey, Mr. Tyll. Mr. Tyll. They may see you as unmerciful. I think you still believe in miracles. Hey, Mr. Tyll.
It is the Tyll Show, Starcom Radio Network. Great coverage coming out of Florida. This is amazing work that our affiliates are doing. I love these people. If you operate a small radio station in America, you're one of my people. Love you. And the work that you do on days like this really prove who you are and what a community is all about. Let's face it, okay? Not very glamorous, highly dangerous. It doesn't pay a fortune at all because you don't get remember Dan Rather in the old days? He used to hang on to the pole. He was down at Key West. He's holding on to a pole. You know, he's still getting $500,000 or whatever that day. Not small radio people. They don't do it for the money. They don't do it for the credit. They do it because they care. And we have 13 affiliates in the state of Florida. God bless them all and the job that they're doing. All right, Hurricane Harvey was just like, it feels like a minute ago. And that situation continues to plague neighborhoods and communities in its aftermath. There are so many questions that arise after a storm and damage and sad, terrible losses. We do the post-mortem. There's a lot to learn. John Tours is with us. John is a professor of political science at LaGrange College. He says there are 8 schools in the Houston Independent School District who cannot use their schools due to Harvey's devastating damage. By the way, you should go to www.Houston, I want to say this right, Houston is D, that's HOUSTONISD.org /Harvey. If you'd like to donate to help these kids get supplies and some temporary classrooms. That's where they're at right now. You see, what's most important, I think, and our guest maybe will reinforce this and help us get more detail around it, is what really happens at the micro level of families and kids and households, much more than a lot of what we're going to hear for the next 2 days about government, bureaucracy, and apparatus and insurance companies, and all that stuff matters. But our focus right here and now is on families who are in this horrible situation. John, welcome to the Ed Tyll Show on Starcom Radio Network.
Ed, thanks for having me on.
You know, everything is fast and furious these days, so I guess here we are in a learning session over a storm whose damage is still being dealt with while we're trying to wrap our minds around another storm that could, in fact, be bigger and more damaging. But all these superlatives and comparative terms lose their meaning because these are real experiences. So let's begin with what we learned from Harvey that would be relevant in our minds as we get ready to face Irma.
Oh wow, that's a very important question. Of course, some of the problems that I think we've noticed is that what we haven't learned from Hurricane Katrina, over and over again, I've been throughout the Gulf, and a lot of times people would tell me, oh, hurricanes don't hit us, or they're not as big a deal, or, that's going to hit somewhere else. And it turns out that, no, you better have a plan. The most important thing we can learn is it's almost like being a good parent. Chances are you've made a lot of the important decisions before you have the kid. You plan for the income, you've planned, you've read the parenting books, you've got some ideas, you picked up you've done everything before you even have the kid. And unfortunately, what we learn is you got to do all your preparations before the hurricane hits, maybe, months to years ahead of time. You practice. And the last thing you want to do is want to start thinking about your preparation, a week or less away.
the onslaught of Harvey at the time, they did a great deal of explaining lowland and terrain, etc. This seems to me to be in short supply in media coverage, but incredibly important, knowing your terrain and how it behaves under some conditions, so that when extreme conditions come, you have a baseline from which to, expand, reinforce, etc. Can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, how much of what is done that matters in these situations is done by logarithm, algorithm, mathematics, and charts, and how much of it is knowing a bend, a creek, a land formation, and its relevance to what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, you probably covered it already, but Houston's virtually built on a swamp, and it's not far from there that the Battle of San Jacinto took place, where a small Texas army trapped a gigantic Mexican army, in these swamps. They were able to cut them off, and so you're building the city of Houston pretty much close to the victory site, and I can understand why you'd say, well, this is a good spot, it would be a good port, but it's also swamp, in that area. And so you have all these, bayous that, maybe one bayou by itself doesn't matter, but then when they're interlocking with each other, some of you have a grid of them. One of my professors from Florida State, who's now at Rice University, was describing it this morning. She says, oh, we're high and dry where we are, but that's the problem. You're kind of marooned. Other people are not only getting it bad, but there's only so far that we can venture out before you're blocked by some of these bayous and creeks. This almost like a labyrinth of them.
Got it. Now, I'm looking at an old map of Katrina, and I'm looking at a map from Hurricane Harvey. I'm looking at Irma. Are these three different worlds of hurricane, or do we start to see things that we now know every time you're going to get hit there, this is going to happen? You know what I mean? Like, are we able to benefit from the three of them being better understood? Does that make us ready for anything, or are these things just too unique that any plan that would have worked for one necessarily is not going to work for the other?
Yeah, I think that's a fair characterization because, you're right. There are some commonalities about how to react, how to do disaster preparation, how to know where your assets are, how to keep them dry. Houston's obviously a port. It's pretty close to the coast. New Orleans is more of a river town. I've had people who have been surprised to learn that New Orleans is upriver. It's not like right directly on the coast. You won't find good New Orleans beaches anywhere. Another thing that stuns people is, believe it or not, Hurricane Katrina was, when it hit, was a Category 3, and it did not hit over New Orleans. That showed the example of what happens when you don't have your levees prepared.
Right.
All of the river control, Lake Pontchartrain swamp people. I took people out to New Orleans later after that storm, months later, and the student said, you can't see where there's any damage. Well, we're downtown. That's not where, it's not like the French Quarter is being flooded or so.
Right.
I'll take you to where it is. And it was in a different section of town, a poorer section of town. You can still see the devastation as recently as this year. You can tell which sections had a flood and which didn't. So each presents some different problems.
Absolutely.
Miami, obviously they're going to be along the coast. They've got beaches and stuff, which is different from Houston, a little bit inland.
No doubt. Now, one of the things that ties them together is the kind of leadership that, the White Houses, I got to believe, and again, you can't prove any of this, but you look at what you see and you try to figure out what are they trying to do. Even if they're the most selfish reasons in the world on the part of any president, what you want to do is look like you're comforting the devastated area. Moral support is the key. And they have these bad experiences. Bush with the flyover. Trump the other day, I guess, handed a package into a truck, and they made big fun of him because he should have been putting it in the back of the truck. It might almost be impossible to get that little kabuki theater right in an adversarial world. But would you recommend maybe they start doing something else? Couldn't the White House or a commission some planes and supplies. That could be from the White House. Maybe get the White Castle burgers thrown down there warm. Juices, smoothies, stuff that was maybe a tad of an upgrade because it's on the White House budget, and the White House would get the planes to drop it, and maybe it's wrapped in something that people, oh, here we go, it's something from the White House, and it's a treat. You know what I mean? Like if you want to do something nice for them, it's not show up and suck up all the resources and the camera crew and make yourself a spectacle. It's do something above that they have no expectation of. Does that make any sense?
It does. And I think, for example, and I don't mean to be too critical of our president, but at the same time, I mean, you think we've learned from Hurricane Katrina. This is not a good weekend to go up to Camp David. And people say, well, there's all kinds of high-tech stuff over at Camp David. He's alone in the conference room, and he's interfacing with the war room. No, you need to be in the war room. This is, devastating hurricanes. There are floods going on, and, you're relying on a communication device. You need, Trump needs to be in the room, seeing everything of what's going on, and people need to see him there. I've been shocked that nobody gets on national TV and has an address to the nation. I mean, you and I lived through the era of like Jimmy Carter getting on national TV and telling us we have an energy crisis and putting on a sweater like Mr. Rogers. I mean, some people look for that. They look for some sort of comfort that our leaders are on top of things. That's a good time for a president to come on and say, here are the websites, here's the phone numbers you need to call to send aid. You're reassuring people that every state is sending their National Guard or some assets to drop in the food to get people out to save the drowning victims.
Well, you make me think, one of the things that Trump likes to do is he does like to backslap, and he does like to, give you the old, thumbs up kind of thing. It would be good if the president, I think, shows the nation that he's aware of who's working down there. Mention the governor, mention your mayors, and take 2 minutes. Get on the phone with the mayor. Even if he's a Democrat, that's even more of a reason to pick up the phone and go, hey, something? Yeah. Today you're not a Democrat, you're my buddy. And whatever I can do, like your next door neighbor, I got some buttons to, that's, I think, what the real job is there. Not tossing aside. I mean, it does look good to be, whatever, helping with the relief, but that's not real. You know what I mean? Right. That's not big. That's tiny for a lens of a camera. And in the world we live in, he's right. You do have to have a picture of something positive. If you go with no pictures and you go with no, you're right. Yeah, go ahead.
I agree with you. Chucking a bag of ice into a pickup, I don't want to see my president doing that. I agree there. I also think that, you need to address the nation when, think about it. You and I would remember, maybe my students don't as much, but they remember a time when the president got on national TV, when NBC, CBS, and ABC would give them that 20 minutes. And they would address the nation and say, like, this is a grave crisis that's going on. I mean, the Houston people, I will say it, during Hurricane Dennis, storm sent a lightning bolt through our house, and it burned down. And there was a heavy amounts of rain. I'm standing in rain up to my knees, trying to get a few possessions out of our house. And just from the mindset of someone who's lost almost everything, you feel very alone at that moment. You feel like, oh, my gosh, I'm in a bad situation. And it felt so good to have our college, our church, our community. They sent people over. People helped us. Our college put my family up in a dorm.
Right.
And we were just one family who lost something. And then you don't feel so alone, when you've got people helping you.
That's it. I think,
hearing that the pastor, says, prayers for the tourist family. Okay, you're saying something verbally, but it helped to know that. I felt like a shot in the arm.
Right. You got it. Well, I wonder what the life of a political science professor has been like for the past 24 or 36 months. Boy, oh boy, you must have had fun with this, no matter which side. How could you not? This was the most exciting. Depending on the moment, the day, the personality, the things that was, and it still goes. We still have presidential candidates writing books, tossing items and theories. This is an exciting time for you, I've got to believe.
You remember the old Chinese proverb where they say it's a curse and says, may you live in interesting times. And we are definitely living in interesting times.
Indeed.
And what I have is I have a bag full of political buttons, and you've got candidates, Democrats and Republicans back to 1936. I went with students to see Trump, to see Ted Cruz, to see Bernie Sanders, and to go to a Hillary Clinton rally. And, I try and expose students to every possible angle, and I think they really appreciate that. They don't feel terrified to go to class. What are we going to argue about now? It gives them a sense of, I'm not going to be graded down because I like this candidate or that candidate.
I'm going to share something with you because I can't wait to hear what your reaction is, because I know what you've heard over the past couple of years, right? The snowflake, the hypersensitivity, the inability to handle adversity, da-dee-da-da-da-do. It's a very long song that I'm not going to replay for you right now, but you know that. So I want to say something and hear what you have to say. A good education, authentic educational experience does strengthen the abilities that some seem to complain about now. So the answer, right? The answer to me is no different than it was when I was a schoolboy in the 60s learning civics and being told, we were told, this is going to sounds like grandpa at the, in front of the fireplace in a rocking chair. But I'll say it. Our teachers told us to stay home when Alan Shepard launched, because that was part of the education. We used to wheel these were the nuns, Our Lady of Solace in the Bronx. They were right there on the daily news being brought into class and study, whether it was the riots or civil rights. We were immersed, and we felt, this is the point I want to make, in contrast to what I hear today, we felt equipped. We weren't cocky and thought it was all going to go well. I mean, we were poor. We knew about losing. But we were equipped, and we saw equipment, mental strength, and vision. We saw these things. So I wonder how you feel when you're looking for them and you're in the midst of this experience, what it's like for you, snapshot, if you could share with us. Are you looking for that? Are you feeling that?
You bet. It's we share something else in common. I was raised in Catholic school as well, although I was out in El Paso, Texas. And when I was an 11-year-old kid, this stuck in my mind. You remember the movie Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, came out. And the French archaeologist tells Indiana Jones, they're in some bar in Egypt, and he says, Indy, we are just merely passing through history. And he refers to the Ark of the Covenant and says, this is history. And I find myself saying that more and more often to the students. We are living in interesting times. These are historical events not to be ignored. That's all the students want to talk about was Hurricane Irma today, and they're all concerned. They're from South. They have families, South Georgia, Florida. We looked at that. We looked at hurricane response. We gave some of the traditional politics a break, and we talked about hurricanes. And then we were analyzing what students are like. Is this getting worse? Are they getting more frequent? And so over the weekend, we're doing a research project on just that very question.
Wow.
We had a similar thing happen when Osama bin Laden was killed. The students were all excited about it, and they said, Dr. Turris, can we watch TV? Well, they've been watching TV since 11 that night. Mm-hmm. And I said, we have two choices. We can watch history or we can make history. They said, how do you mean? Well, let's look at other cases where key terrorists were kidnapped or captured or killed. And did that increase or decrease terrorism? So we spent the hour and a half of class researching that. Our results were published the next day, and they found that after a slight increase in terrorism, activity from that group like Al-Qaeda would go dramatically down, which is exactly what happened.
Wow. How exciting for you to orchestrate that. There's got to be a real thrill that you get out of this stuff. I thank you so much. I'm watching the clock here. We have to get more Irma update, and you might have heard me mention we have 13 stations in Florida, and I'm telling you, they're the bravest people because they're out there going neighborhood to neighborhood right now. So I do have to get to them, but what a pleasure to have you on the show. Will you come back on and talk more about what you've learned from these experiences?
I would, and I just want to say prayers out to all your listeners down in Florida. Be safe.
God bless you. Thank you for saying that. And for people who want to reach out to you, will they find you at www.ktrss.com? houstonisd.org /Harvey. Our guest, John Torres, is professor of political science at LaGrange College, and we thank you very much. Is that a good way to follow up with you?
You can follow me. You can also contact me at ktorres@lagrange.edu if you got any questions.
Oh, excellent. LaGrange.edu and J. Torres, T-U-R-E-S. All right, great. Thanks so much, Professor. Have a great weekend. Thank you really for a valuable interview today.
You too, Ed.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Mr. Till, do you think it's all just overkill?
Starcom Radio Network AM/FM stations all across America. An urgent update about Irma. Stand by.
Mr. Till, really no reason to come down on you. Surely a little bit of gratitude is overdue. Go ahead and make 'em furious. Tell 'em where to go. They're only blindly curious to the hell down below, Mr. Till. We want the glory, but we lack the will. No interest for the unfulfilled and the silent kill. Radio, we can take it